Hello, everyone. Good morning and Happy New Year. I'm very excited to have the two primary authors of our new book, Orphan Drug Development for Rare Diseases, here to answer your questions. Our two authors are Sundar Ramanan, PhD, MBA, Senior Vice President of Biotherapeutic Strategic Operations for Just Evotech Biologics, and Sunny Dave, MPharm, Global Regulatory Affairs Professional, Novo Nordisk. Before we get started with questions, I'd like to talk a little bit about the book development process and about the book. So Sundar and Sunny came to us in October of 2020 with a book proposal to the editorial advisory committee. And after a couple revisions, the editorial advisory committee gave it the thumbs up. The book development process takes about 12 to 13 months from beginning to end. And I work with the leads on the book and the editorial advisory committee to oversee the whole process for book development. So if you're interested in helping RAPS create books, identify topics, suggest topics for books, please reach out to me and I will put my email in the chat. So a little bit about orphan drug development for rare diseases. The book is an ebook only. It's 176 pages. It's comprised of 7 chapters in addition to abbreviations, acronyms, glossary of terms, and a very in-depth index. The book covers 30 countries, including the US, EU, UK, Japan, Australia, Canada, and rest of the world. We have a foreword that was written by Ava A. Temkin, JD, a partner at King and Spalding, formerly with the FDA. The price for the book is $130 for RAPS members, $180 for non-members. Again, it's ebook only, and it was released at the end of November. What's covered in the book? Every aspect of orphan drug development, including history, incentives, benefits, patient engagement, orphan drug designation, marketing authorization, and market access. So I'm going to start off the Q&A with a question for Sundar. Sundar, why this topic? Why was it important for you to bring this to RAPS and important to develop this book?
It's a great question. Why now? Ever since I transitioned from personally grad school to industry about a couple of decades back, I've been working on the drug development, starting with hemophilia, which is also a rare disease, a rare condition. Over the past two decades, we've seen significant improvement in access to new technologies, right? And for example, roughly 3 decades back, the only option available to hemophilia patients were blood transfusion, and subsequently came the purified plasma. With the advent of recombinant technology, we could make proteins to replace in a safe manner. So the risk-benefit ratio wasn't favorable for patients. And we've also been at gene therapy for a couple of decades in hemophilia now. However, we have seen a rapid advances in science and technology, specifically in the areas of cell and gene therapy in a more precise manner. On the patient front, there's a lot of patients. You might be surprised that there's about 7,000 rare diseases, a vast majority of them with no treatment or cure, and affecting about 30 million US patients, roughly 10% of the patient population. So even though the conditions may be rare, but collectively, there's a huge unmet medical need for treatment option for patients. There's also a need for information. There's no such single source that we found that brings together all the components that is important for stakeholders involved in the drug development for patients with rare diseases. So we are attempting to do our part in addressing this important need, Gloria.
Thank you, Sundar. Sunny, I'll ask you a question. What was your thought process when developing the structure and scope of this book?
Yeah, so based on our drug development experience in the rare disease space and extensive research on this topic, we designed the book in such a way that it covers and connects all the elements involved in the drug development process for rare disease. It starts with the history, how our orphan policy came into the picture, what triggered it. For example, I can say in US, Dr. Marion led the task force for creating the orphan policy. And then the chapter moves on to the other crucial elements such as patient engagement and then incentives. Then we'll talk about the orphan drug development, and the chapter ends with the case studies and examples and market access.
Okay. Thank you, Sunny. Sundar, what was the rationale for including countries or regions where there is no true orphan drug regulatory oversight? And how did you handle that?
Actually, we intended this book for expansion for the most of the world. We use the word most of the world to highlight the fact that majority of the population lives in this part of the world, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So the book starts with regions where the framework for drug development, specifically for rare diseases, is mature. The first country to implement an Orphan Drug Act was the US, shortly followed by the EU. The rest of the countries more or less take pages from the US framework. And we would like more countries to adopt. Right now, many of the countries don't even have orphan drug policies, but few of the patient advocacy groups are very active in implementing policies in that country. And some of them refer to the ODD of ICH countries along some specific countries, specific requirements in a case-by-case basis. So we wanted to include a framework that other countries could utilize. At the same token, we framed it in such a way where we have the most extensive history in terms of the Orphan Drug Development Act, as well as the policies, patient engagement, which other countries could take pages on and apply to their region of interest.
Thank you, Sundar. I wanted to let the audience know also that we are dropping a link to purchase the book in chat, as well as the table of contents, so you can see the chapters and a sample chapter. So keep an eye on the chat for those things. Sunny, a question for you. Can you give us a brief overview of the story this book tells?
For the developers and for the readers, the book can be used as an encyclopedia or as a guide for all the elements involved during the orphan drug development. And the elements which we have included, as we mentioned and we communicated previously, are the history, then incentives and benefits as per the country requirements, and the patient engagement, and then orphan drug designation. Then we'll move to the orphan drug development required during the marketing authorization, and then market access. And for each element and wherever possible, we have tried to give a real world case and examples, case studies.
Thank you, Sunny. I have two questions from Karen Jaffe in the audience. The first is, and I'll address this to you, Sunny, does the book cover the impact to the registrational clinical study design by an ODD pathway?
Yes, the book, just I'm reading the question, just a minute. Yeah, so we have actually covered the clinical trial design throughout the drug development, not during. The ODD does not require a clinical design as such, means you can also go via in vitro studies and it's not like a clinical study is mandatory for the ODD designation. And coming to your second question, we have also mentioned about QIDP in our book, and how we have not elaborated that much, but the QIPD, the summary of the QIPD and how it can be used by the orphan drug developers is also included in the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sundar, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
I think I think you guys covered it. Thanks, Sunny.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. A question for Sundar. What will the readers gain from reading this book?
So we intended this book to be a very simple reference guide for anyone involved in the rare disease space. Readers will get a complete understanding of what it takes to develop a drug for a rare disease, as well as the available tools and resources, specifically incentives, and a framework of how to go about what tools that FDA is providing, what incentives are available. We intended this book for readers to get the entire picture of drug development for rare disease from start to finish, i.e. from discovery to reimbursement.
Okay, thank you. Sunny, what is the importance of the countries and regions covered?
So most of the resources available in the public domain are more focused on the ICH region. This book is unique because it has, along with ICH regions, we have covered ROW regions such as APEC, Asian, GCC countries, Ukraine, Russia, and LATAM countries. So, and in this book, we're trying to link whether there is similarity between these regions and with the ICH regions, or there is differences, and whether some of the regions are getting influenced by the ICH regions. So this all story we have highlighted in our book.
Okay, thank you, Sunny. We have a question, Sunny, from Prasant from Novo. How do you see that orphan drug development in next 5 years in Indian market, considering the local data generation is a mandate for getting NDA approval?
So in India, if you see, the orphan drug development policies are actually getting matured compared to ICH regions, and there are also state policies for orphan rare disease drug development, and the main key player for initiating these policies is ODRI in India. So I can say that in 5 years, the local data generation will be much more compared to what we see now. And it depends also on the registry, like patient registry, rare disease registry. So in India, we don't have a rare disease registry like how we have in US. So that is the first step to develop. Then we can go to the orphan drug development and other policies.
Okay.
Gloria, I can add a couple of points here. Even though the current climate is requiring, or the word mandate was used, needing the local data from local population, the policies are emerging, and there's a strong case that has been made by multiple trade associations, patient organizations to do away with local data, right, to enable faster access to data from the ICH regions. So I do expect, in the interest of patients, with the continued push, that mandate may be diluted to a certain extent, and hopefully it gets done away with, because it's not in the interest of patients for faster access to these medicines.
Okay, thank you, Sundar. Another question from the audience, Anup Kumar. I would be curious to know few benefits of orphan designation.
Sunny, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. So there are, in general, if we can say that the few benefits are tax credits, then protocol assistance, and exclusivity. And the benefits actually differ, and there is a similarity and differences between the exclusivity based on the country. For example, in US, it is 7 years exclusivity for ODD, and in EU, it is 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, Sundar?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
For this
thank
question.
you.
Yeah.
Another question from Nicholas Schmidt. Does this book cover early access pathways for ODD to reach patients faster? For example, recent French new regulation for EAP. Sunny, you want to take that?
Yeah, so we have it's a access without a centralized procedure. I believe the question is directed to. So it's national procedure. So we have not specified in the book the individual countries. So from a centralized procedure, how we will be, how it should be developed, because in EU, the development for orphan is as per the centralized procedure. So the ODD and marketing authorization will be through through the centralized procedure. And from, like, your question is more towards the market access part. So I believe it's country in France, there is like orphan reimbursement, and they actually have a EAP, but we have not elaborated more into that topic. Do you want to add anything, Sundar, on this?
You're spot on, Sunny. Thank you.
Another question from Shane Christo. Where can I find information about rare diseases? For example, a list of orphan drugs approved, etc.
Do you want to take Sundar?
Sunny, you go for it.
Yeah. So we can get the rare disease, the information on the rare disease through ODD website, the Orphan Drug Database website of US FDA, the National Organization for Rare Disease, NORD. And you can, in EU, you can get from the EU Commission website and Orphanet. So these are the 4 database. And what it is advisable that whenever you are applying, you calculate the prevalence. The disease mentioned in the database may not be rare as of today. So it is advisable that you calculate the prevalence or the incidence as per today, as per 2020, if you are applying in 2020. So this is advisable.
Okay, thank you. There is a question on if a case study on cystic fibrosis by Vertex is included in the book.
So we have included the cystic fibrosis. We have included Vertex in not as a whole, as a detailed case study, but we have included as part of one of the element, because the in vitro studies, the ODD was received via in vitro studies, so we have included that.
Thank you. Another question, it says, hello, Sunny. Is this book also capturing the different strategies for getting fast track approvals in regulated and non-regulated markets? For example, reliance pathway. Also, any scope of RWE is included in getting access for ODD to reach the patients.
Yeah, so the reliance pathway, I believe the attendee is referring to the Brazil country. So yes, we have included the orphan drug designation pathway, and reliance pathway is also required for faster access. So we have mentioned that in a book. And the second question was
use
also,
of real world evidence.
Yeah, use of real world evidence and getting access for ODD.
Yeah, so we have mentioned the importance of RWE and EHR, electronic health records, also considered as one of the tools to evaluate the data and present.
See, this is let me add, Sunny, this is also a pretty emerging space, right? Recently, the FDA issued a guidance document on the use of real world evidence in regulatory decision-making that is fairly recent. And if you just were to look at the quality of data, right, and this is extremely important in the emerging, especially particularly for rare disease, where the patients engage in the drug development process. And we also have emergence of technology using distributed clinical trials, where the quality of the data that's self-reported by the patients, as well as from the EHR, is much better than before, maybe even a decade back, and thereby enabling to be considered towards the label. So clearly, yes, we have included and mentioned the role of real-world evidence in the book towards not only just the ODD, but also the approval process as well, and getting included, including the evidence generated from the real-world evidence in the label. Yeah.
Thank you, Sundar. There is another question. Can you provide insight on the patient engagements? Sunny, do you want to take that?
Sundar, do you want to?
No, go for it, and then I'll add.
Yeah. So patient engagement, the book is focused. It's a patient-focused book. We prepared in such a way that the patients are always at the center of all the especially for the rare disease drug development. So we have kept the patient engagement in each of the chapters.
Sundar, anything to add?
No, I think he covered it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Another question from the audience. Is this book also capturing, did I already read that one? I think I already read that one. It says, hi, Sunny. Can we use personalized healthcare concept for ODD?
Do you want to add on that, Sundar, anything?
See, the orphan drug designation has a specific criteria, right, in order to seek the FDA, and so personalization, if the data and fits within the framework outlined by either the FDA or the EMA, then yes. But you have to double click on that question further to even understand. But the framework for ODD is very well defined to seek and obtain that is very well defined by the FDA and by EMA.
Thank you. All right, Sundar, another question for you. What is your key takeaway from any one chapter, chapters, or the book? What do you want to share with the audience?
The key takeaway, I would say it's a patient, as Sunny mentioned, we've developed this book as a patient-focused book, so that we focus on the tools, incentives, resources, and practices for developing drugs for rare diseases and how best to use them, right? The intent is if we can use this and enable acceleration, and it should serve as a catalyst in enabling faster access to information. So the book could be used by any number of people, starting with academic institutions, nonprofit organizations, small or large pharmaceutical companies, and subject matters and regulatory professionals at all levels. So our focus is essentially to provide a one-stop shop for easy access to all the available resources, tools, incentives for people engaged in this space, so that we can enable faster and bringing the drugs to the patients faster. That's our intent.
Thank you. Sunny, can you give the audience ways on how a company can reduce its financial burden in the orphan drug development process?
Yeah, so the financial burden can be reduced by collaborating with different stakeholders like patients, regulatory agencies, and academic institutes. And along with this, we suggest that it is good for the developers, orphan drug developers, to apply for the grants, which will actually reduce the financial burdens. So some of the grants are national history studies grants, clinical trial grants given by NORD and NIH. And we have also described about the similarities, eligibility criteria about these grants in our book.
Thank you. Sundar, can you describe what roles patients and advocacy groups play in the stages of orphan drug development?
They play a central role, actually. The 21st Century Cures Act actually provides a pretty important, places an important emphasis on the role of patient, right? So we have embodied that, and each chapter emphasized the critical and multidimensional role of patients and patient advocacy groups during various stages of drug development. For example, the number of rare disease organizations actively involved at various stages, including, say, for example, characterization of the disease, defining the eligibility criteria, and during the FDA review and approval process at the scientific advisory committee, so through testimonies, and post-approval through publications and communication. So again, with the advent of digital tools, patient groups can help accelerate the drug development process, thereby making the treatment options for patients available much faster than it would have been possible even a decade earlier.
Thank you, Sundar. Sunny, can you describe some of the strategies used to overcome developer challenges?
Yeah, so I can give an example. Like for one of the challenges developers of orphan drug face is the patient recruitment and retention due to the small number of patients. So this challenge can be mitigated by involving patients globally, inclusion of patient-reported outcomes, and real-world evidence and EHR. And in some cases, to reduce the patient's ease of commute, because the trials mostly for the orphan drugs will be multinational or multi-site, it is advisable to use tools like e-consent forms and mobile applications for monitoring the parameters.
Okay, thank you, Sunny. We have another question from Tony Katka. You discussed natural history studies in depth, especially in the US chapter. If you already have an IND on an investigational drug, can you submit a natural history study to that IND, or would it be best to meet with the agency first to make that determination?
Do you want to go, Sundar, on that part?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Tony. A little bit more context will be needed for that, right? I mean, this is a very specific question and depends on which stage of the IND you are in. I mean, if it's just starting the phase 1 trials, or you are doing an IND for a new indication, how much of the evidence the agency has seen, but it's always advisable, I mean, to set up a meeting with the agency, discuss and present the evidence so that they can reach agreements, right, before we go into the IND directly. So that'll be what I would recommend. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sundar. I wanted to remind the audience that in the chat, we have a link to purchase the book. There's a link to the table of content, so you can see all the chapters, and there is a link to a sample chapter. Another question from the audience, from Ivy Peterson. How long did it take you to complete your research for this book? And what were some of the obstacles or challenges you encountered along the way?
Sunny, you want to go first? Yeah.
Yeah. We started the book in October 2020, and we completed the book in November. So November 2021. So around 1 year it took us. But before that, we had a background on working on the orphan drug. Like Sundar has more than 15-20 years of experience in industry, in drug development and all, and along with my experience. And then we were having some background. So it was easier for us from the content part we were aware about the things on orphan drugs, like where to find the information.
And some of the obstacles are, we would have liked to include information from more countries, right, Sunny, in the most of the world. But most countries that we could not find information, or they don't have the pathway. So that's I would say an obstacle, right? But access to medication in these countries are also difficult. So we've pretty much covered where information is available, and where it's not available. But we will continue to evolve this book in the next editions as well.
So, and I'd like to add that the proposal that Sunny and Sundar submitted to the editorial advisory committee was well researched in and of itself. They provided a lot of information, which is wonderful for the editorial advisory committee to look at and evaluate to see if it met, it would meet the needs and be beneficial to the regulatory community. So even before that proposal was submitted, there obviously was some research done into putting that proposal together. So thank you for the thorough proposal. And as I stated earlier, the development process takes about 12 to 13 months from initiation, from acceptance of a proposal through to publication, because we do also an independent review process of all the chapters. So Sunny and Sundar wrote all of the chapters, but we had an independent reviewer from the editorial advisory committee read all those chapters and provide them feedback. And they addressed the feedback and reconciled the comments, really to give it more validity and give it more quality, to produce the highest quality content. So Linda McBride, thank you, from the editorial advisory committee, served as the reviewer, and I think that process worked very well. So again, I'm going to say, if anyone's interested in working with me and the editorial advisory committee on books, I'll drop again my email into the chat. But I think the first thing is a well thought out proposal, and a well researched proposal helps kick off that process. So I'll ask the audience, any more questions? So Sunny and Sundar, I'll just I do have another question. Oh, I just have a comment from Dr. Mina Malik. Thank you for sharing the contents of the book. I think this is one spot collection to have a complete overview on the ODD. Congratulations. So that's a very nice comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sunny, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts, I would say that hope the book is useful and is informative to the readers, and please provide feedback on the book so it will help us in future revisions.
Thank you, Sunny. Sundar, any closing remarks?
I hope you find it useful and enjoyable, just as we found it. This was very enriching for us and meaningful endeavor in facilitating the drug development process. And as Sunny mentioned, we look forward to your comments and feedback on making this better in the next version.
Thank you, Sundar.